Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show. And I'm happy to have with us today Sharla Frost. Welcome to the show, Sharla.
Thank you for having me, Zane.
So, Sharla was a semester away in her high school from becoming class valedictorian when her high school principal told her she shouldn't become a secretary, that she should go to law school instead. So, 35 years and 60 plus jury trials later, Sharla Frost became one of the top litigators in the country, retired then to her family's cattle ranch in a place called Frogville, Oklahoma. We all know and love Frogville, and started writing children's books, now 7 and counting. So you were about to graduate, so this goes back way, valedictorian in a 37-person class in Frogville, Oklahoma, planning to become a secretary, and your principal redirected your entire life in one conversation. What do you remember about that moment?
Well, I remember we actually had it twice. I He was a fascinating guy. He was a reformed lawyer himself. He didn't like practicing law, so he had gone back and gotten a doctorate in teaching, and he liked little bitty schools, and he usually lasted 1 year in each of them because he didn't play politics. He loved the kids, but he hated the politics. So the summer before school started, I get a call from the school secretary, and she says the principal will see you at 2 o'clock. And I'd never been in the principal's office in my life, much less during summer. So I get there, and he has read the files of every kid in school.
Wow.
Now, there were only 200 of us. So, and it was Fort Towson was the name of the school, even though I grew up in Frogville. And he asked me what I was planning to do. And I said, I'm going to be an executive secretary. My favorite aunt was a legal secretary. My counselor's favorite sister was an executive secretary. I was going to be a secretary. And he said, No, you're going to have a secretary. We'll work with this later. And about 6 months later, we sat down and had the discussion again. And he says, So, what are you going to do? And I said, I thought we had this discussion. I'm going to be a secretary. And he said, No, you're not. You're going to law school. And that's what I remember. It was a very interesting conversation. And to his credit, he was very determined to make sure that I did something that he thought I was capable of doing.
Wow. So after you left high school, did you go back there and tell them, hey, look what I've done? Or was that the end of it? Did you just leave this lasting impression on you and then?
Now, I stayed in touch with him while I was in college and in law school. Unfortunately, he passed away about 5 or 6 years ago, but he even came to our class reunion when my high school graduating class had I think it was our 20th reunion. So he was someone who stayed involved. Fort Towson, where I went to school, is the closest school district to Frogville. And all of my dad's family had attended there. My sister and I both went there, and many of our little cousins also attended. So it's been an ongoing relationship with the school.
Where the wind goes blowing across the plain. That's what I could sing you Oklahoma from heart. My my mother loved that Rogers and Hammerstein anyway. So I digress. So your family's been in Frogville since the 1880s, 5 generations on one side, four on the other. What was it like growing up on a cattle ranch in a place that's that small?
Well, you learn to read a lot and be able to entertain yourself. It's a very nice way to grow up because you are self-sufficient. There was a lot of family around, so it was a traditional upbringing in that way. And you don't have a lot of the distractions and difficulties that you have in big cities.
So you're the first lawyer in your family. Your dad was a railroad engineer. Your mom worked on the ranch. What did they think when you told them, I'm going to go to law school?
It's really interesting. They basically said, okay. sort of like, I don't know why you would want to do that. My father was very determined that I get a teaching certificate. I was on a full academic scholarship in college, so I could basically take anything that I wanted. And I was an English major, but I was what they call a straight English major, not English
Hmm.
education. And the only fight I can remember ever actually having with my father, he was determined I was going to get a teaching certificate because you never knew when some man might let you down and you would need to fall back on that. And it's like, I'm never doing that. So they were supportive, but a little puzzled. Yeah.
So you landed at Fulbright and Jaworski at a Baylor Law School. Now this is if this feels like an episode of This Is Your Life, well, whatever. And then
You
you
did a lot of
co-founded
research. Yeah.
Powers and Frost with James Powers and ran it as a managing partner for over 20 years. What was it like building a litigation boutique firm from scratch as a woman in the 1980s?
Well, I always said to begin with, Jim was my rock star. I kept him in trial all the time, and I tried to figure out how to run a business because, again, I was an English major. I had not taken any business classes. I didn't know anything about business or taxes or any of the things you needed to do, but it was a great opportunity. And you just learned how to do it. I had sat down with a very good friend of my dad's, an elderly gentleman who practiced law in Hugo, Oklahoma. And I told him I had this opportunity and I really didn't know whether I ought to take it or not. And to his dying day, he would laugh and say he knew less about anything than he knew about opening a law firm in Houston. However, I was young, I was healthy. If it didn't work out, I'd find another job. And that was some of the best advice anyone ever gave me because sometimes you just have to close your eyes and jump. And I wanted to learn how to do more than just shuffle papers. So you buckle down and do it.
So you call your sister Gwyn, or you called her your consigliere. What was that?
Well, she was also a partner with us. She was our first associate at Powers and Frost, and then our first partner at Powers and Frost. And she managed the firm when Jim and I were in trial. Both of us spent a tremendous amount of time in trial. And even to this day, as I do mediations and some other work, she is the person that assists me with all of that. She's a very competent lawyer. She's very good at things I'm not good at. She's organized. She was a CPA by training. So she's good at the math and business side. I've always told my parents they had one kid who could add and one who could write. I wasn't the one who could add, by the way. But it's always good to have someone you can rely on if you need them. And she has always played that role.
So your book, Power at the Table, became an Amazon bestseller. Had you written anything before that?
I had written some chapters and this and that, but I had never written a book before. Power at the Table was my attempt at developing the sort of business information book that women lawyers need. And when I started doing business development, there really weren't any resources out there. And all those years later, when I got to looking around, there really weren't that many that were targeted at women lawyers. One needs to be able to do business development. It's expected of you if you're a lawyer, unless you're going to be what they call a grinder for all of your life. The law talks about finders, minders, and grinders. Finders are the people who develop business, minders are the ones who manage it, and grinders are the people who actually do the day-to-day work. And unless you want to be a grinder for your whole life, you have to find a way to develop some of your own work. That's also what gives you freedom in the practice of law because it gives you flexibility. But women aren't no one is trained for that. Women are particularly not trained for that. So I took materials that I had developed over the years for training and incorporated those into the book. I thought I was going to wave my hands over that stack of papers and they were magically going to become a book. And let's just say it didn't turn out quite that way. But
So
it
did
was a
you?
fun project.
So how'd you find a publisher that would say that would be interested in publishing the book?
I worked with a group out of Dallas. A friend of mine from high school had just published a couple of books, and I was telling him I had just retired and I was thinking about maybe writing a book. And he said, "You need to meet my publisher and work with him." So that was how I got the introduction.
Oh, interesting. So you've written now Power at the Table 2, expanded for all lawyers. I mean, before the other one was sexist, just for women, and this one is for for all
Yes,
lawyers. Is that right?
that is correct. There's actually a Power at the Table 3 now,
Oh,
which is
okay.
for entrepreneurs, because what I found was that men lawyers wouldn't buy a book that was labeled for women, and non-lawyers wouldn't buy a book that was labeled for lawyers. So the advice is fairly consistent. It's a systematic way of identifying what you're good at, what you want to do, and how to develop clients. But it's tailored for each of those different markets. And I had a co-writer on the third one. My business coach, Craig Duswalt, is my co-author. He wrote an introduction for book 3.
So, what? So you do coaching? Is that right? I'm
A
reading on
little
here.
bit. Coaching's not really my thing. I do keynote speaking, I do some training, I will do group coaching. I don't really have the time or focus to do individual coaching, but I do it for select clients every now and again if they really, really want me to.
So you don't want to be a grinder.
I never wanted to be a grinder. No, grinding was just not my personality.
Okay. So you keynoted Rockstar Impact Conference with a talk called Even Cowgirls Get the Clients. What was your core message there? I like that title, by the way.
Yeah, it's a ripoff of Tim Robbins, even Cowgirls Get the Blues, but it was fun. I take the concepts from the Power at the Table story, the Power at the Table books, and talk about how you need a system and a consistent approach in order to get clients and to expand your business. If you are going to be in business, and it doesn't matter what business it is, the law, the whatever, if you are going to have control of your life, you've got to have control of some of the business and bringing in money. Because if you're bringing in money, then people are more inclined to give you opportunities. And even Cowgirls Get the Clients is about the fact that you don't have to have a business background. You can be a cowgirl like me, and so long as you pay attention to what you're doing and you work hard at it and you are systematic about it, you'll get there. Won't happen overnight, but you'll get there.
So here, I usually like to break these up with some rapid fire in between, so I'm going to do that.
Okay.
So rapid fire. Let me see if I don't butcher this word. Charolais cattle or tiger stripe cross? Which do you prefer?
Actually, I like the Tiger Stripe Cross. They are more durable and they are better able to withstand temperature variations, but Charolais calves are beautiful. They're the white ones, by the way, if you don't know your types of cattle one from the other.
Uh-huh. And are those beef cattle or are they?
They're beef cattle. Ours is a cow, what they call a cow-calf operation. We generate calves and sell those at market, and then generate the next season and sell those at market.
So was this something that was handed down to you? I'm screwing up my own thing. I'm supposed to be in rapid fire. Now I'm going off on left field.
Well, my dad and I were partners in a cow-calf operation in addition to the one that he and my mother have always had. And so to some extent, passed down in the sense that I grew up with it and he was my business partner, not passed down in the sense that I bought the property that I have in the Frogville area and bought the cattle. So it's my entrepreneurial business.
Yes. So one courtroom habit you still can't break.
Always making sure that I am there early. If you are on time in the court, you are late. And there are a lot of judges that start early because they want to catch you because you're not there on time. So I am a fanatic about getting there early if at all possible.
So you must have liked Vince Lombardi because he said if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late.
Apparently, lots of judges have read that, yes, and incorporated it into their DNA.
I did not know that, so I've just been educated. So best meal within 30 miles of Frogville.
Oh, that would probably be my mother's house. Let's just say this is a bit of a food desert, and my mother is a phenomenal Southern cook. So no question about that. 6 months ago, I would have said it was the Fort Towson Depot Steakhouse, but unfortunately, it and 4 other local restaurants all closed within about 6-week time period because restaurant business is a tough business anywhere, and it's certainly tough in rural Oklahoma.
So most intimidating opposing counsel you ever faced?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'll have to think about that one. Most intimidating. See, I'm not really very intimidated, so that one's kind of a tough one for me. Yeah.
All right. How about this one? Next one: piano or horseback? Which do you still do?
Actually, I still do both. I'm not very good at the piano anymore, but I love horseback riding. But I do still have a piano, and I occasionally scare the cats by trying to play on it.
So you were first chair trial counsel in over 60 jury trials, including $1 billion product liability cases. What does it take to walk into a courtroom with that much on the line?
You got to be prepared. I mean, the biggest thing about any trial is you have to be ready to go. You have to have done your homework and be ready. And if you are a trial counsel, you can't be intimidated. You've got to be ready to go. If you think about what's on the line, then you're toast. Your job is to make sure that you do for your client what they need you to do. And you can think about how big it is later.
Okay, so you successfully defended J&J in a talcum powder mesothelioma case. How do you prepare for a trial where the other side has really like a massive emotional advantage?
Well, unfortunately, in most of the cases that I dealt with, the other side had a tremendous emotional advantage because they represent people who've been injured, and by and large, they are very sympathetic. My focus was always on the science and the causation because you have to give validity to the people who've been injured, whether my client is responsible or not. And I did not think in that case my client was responsible, and the jury agreed with us.
Okay. So you come from a family of storytellers. How much of trial law is just storytelling?
A lot of it, because you've got to be able to communicate to the jury what it is that you need them to understand. So no matter how complicated the case is or how complicated the science is, you've got to be able to put it in terms that a regular human being can understand. My ranch tenant has been for many years. He was sort of my trial consultant. Dick is now 89 years old. He is a retired journeyman electrician. He was my junior high church choir director. And when I had a really, really difficult case somewhere that I knew the jury was going to find the issues complicated, I would sit down and talk to him about it. And as he once told me, you don't have to be very smart or educated to know right from wrong. And so long as you can put it in ways that people understand right and wrong, you're going to be fine.
Well, that's a really helpful little tool to have in your belt. So you're now a sought after expert witness. What's the biggest mistake you see lawyers make when they're preparing for a trial?
Leaving their own publicity. You've got to deeply understand the other side's position and not drink the Kool-Aid. You've got to give credit to what the other side's going to do and never underestimate your opponent, because even not very good lawyers can have great cases and wonderful outcomes because they'll outwork you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to switch gears here. So you retired from the courtroom and went back to your childhood home and started writing fantasy adventure for kids. So where did that pivot come from? I mean, what possessed you to think you must have had a central idea that when you did that? Was it for someone, or where did that pivot come from?
Well, not really. The publisher that I worked with on the first Power at the Table book, after we finished the book, we sat down and did sort of what they call a post evaluation. And he wanted to know what I thought about the process and how it had gone. And I said, I really kind of enjoyed it. And remember, this is during COVID. So I retired from courtroom work the 30th of June, 2020. I had given notice to the firm in January, I think it was, and I was completely finished the last day of June. And so I sat down with this guy and we talked about it. And he said, have you ever thought about writing a children's book? And I said, well, no, I don't have children. And he said, well, that's all that's selling during COVID. You might want to think about it. So I thought about it, and I've always loved fairy tales. And sort of like with the first Power at the Table book, I took a look at what was available in the genre. And there are a lot of fantasy books, but a lot of them are really dark. And there aren't many female protagonists unless they are a serious victim or an advocate of one sort or another. And I thought, I think there is a spot in that literature that I could fill. So my protagonist is a girl, and she is just a girl. She's struggling with being a girl and growing up and all of the horrible things that happen to you when you're 13 and you're trying to learn how to survive. But she's neither an advocate nor a victim. And my stories are not dark. They do have complications, but they're more upbeat than that. So they're more traditional than that. And it's given me a chance to go back and read all of classic literature. So who can say no to that?
So uh, what age group are these books for?
They are designed for 7 and up. If you ever read, say, Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland or things like that when you were a kid, that's about the level they are. If you're a 7-year-old, you can read them and really enjoy them. If you're a 70-year-old, you can read them and really enjoy them on a different level. But they are designed not for little bitty kids, because they have legitimate vocabulary and language and complications. But really, the sweet spot's probably 4th to 7th grade.
Mm-hmm. So, how many words are in a typical book of that type? Sorry, I ghostwrite I've ghostwritten a number of books, and I'm just kind of curious.
Have somewhere in the range of 30,000 words. So they're not tremendously long, but they are chapter books and they are substantive books.
Right. They'd have to be 30,000. So Lotus Dilweed. is a
Hmm.
pretty unforgettable character name. How did you create her? Dillweed.
Well, lily pad lotus dillweed and her twin brother crocus dandelion dillweed. And I worked with a team on the first book, and we did a lot of brainstorming on trying to figure out a set of characters and appropriate names and something that was wholesome but memorable. And I like flowers, so we came up with a bunch of flower names.
That's fun. So 7 books, and the latest has Lily tangling with Peter Pan and Captain Hook. So how
Yes.
did you weave the classic stories into the Frogville world? And are the characters, is it based in Frogville?
It is a mythical Frogville.
Okay.
In the mythical Frogville, the town is under a curse from a wizard because they violated one of those cardinal rules of life, and they were mean to somebody, and as a result, the town got cursed. And the curse put on the town was that all of the boys turned into a frog when they turned 13. Lily and her brother are twins. She's a minute older. So she's the one who turns into the frog. And the stories follow her on her quest, first to get a royal kiss to turn back into a girl. Then, after she gets a kiss, not a royal kiss, but that would be telling, so you have to read the book first. Then she has to go on a second quest in order to free her best friend who got turned into a stone. And then, it goes on and on. She keeps trying to get back to Frogville and just can't get there. But I incorporated classic literature themes into them. Each of the books actually comes from a different literary genre. So the first one's really a fairy tale. Second one is Arabian Nights. The third is Irish fairy tales. The fourth is strongly influenced by Norse mythology. Fifth is Beowulf, if you remember Beowulf from junior high.
Mm-hmm.
The kids have to grab the ogre and do a favor for King Stephen. And King Stephen, by the way, is a legitimate historical figure. Part of the research that I do, I make sure that the references that are to classic literature are accurate. And if I refer to historical figures, I make sure I get that right as well.
So these books are selling. So Mark, how is each edition doing versus the previous one?
They're doing okay. I can't say I'm getting rich out of them. I'm actually working on book 8. I have a co-author on that, and we're not quite ready to release it or announce who my co-author is, but it is an extension of the story of Lily and the Lost Boys coming back to Frogville after they've left Neverland at the end of book 7. So that's been fun and interesting. It's a little bit different twist than some of the other stories, but a good project.
So I've only been involved where I've done everything in my own head, but you're working with a team. How is that different, writing a book with a team versus the solitary, what I usually think of as writing a book in a solitary kind of way?
Well, and I worked with the team on the first two, uh, more on the first one, less on the second, essentially none on the third, and then did it myself on the remainder. This book 8, I was asked to work with someone who had an idea that they wanted to put into a story and had identified the Frogville Quest series as a great launching pad for what they wanted to do, which is really, both humbling and exciting that, somebody
Mm-hmm.
read my books and was inspired to do something. In terms of what it's like to work with a team like that, in the law, you generally work with a team. So there's a lot of brainstorming and give and take. And to me, that was very natural because there is that individualized part where you're creating and you're revising and you're structuring, but there's always some give and take with someone else saying, well, maybe something over here, or maybe we don't like that, or did you ever think about such and such? And so it was actually very helpful because I had never written a book.
Mm-hmm.
The Power at the Table books are business focused books. So that's a very different thing. Those are structured and they're focused and they're creative in a sense, but not in the sense of creating an entire mythology, which is what we have with the Frogville Quest books.
So I'm going to shift gears again. So you run Recreate Fort Towson, nonprofit revitalizing your hometown. You've also opened a mercantile, an event center. You chair Oklahoma Southeast Economic Development Organization. But you're supposed to be retired.
I call it retooled. Retirement didn't work very well for me. I spent about 2 weeks sitting on the couch watching really bad television and went,
That's all there is.
worked for me. And my term on Oklahoma Southeast has finished, so I'm not still doing that. Fort Towson, which is the little town where I went to high school, is a really cool historic little town and is adjacent to where the Civil War actually ended. I keep telling everybody it really ended at Dokesville because the last Confederate general surrendered at Dokesville, Oklahoma, which is a mile north of Fort Towson. And Fort Towson was the last fort on the end of the Trail of Tears. That's where the Indians transited out and were dispersed, the Choctaws at least. There, some others were at Fort Gibson. But it's a wonderful little town. The state of Oklahoma does not do a good job of supporting rural towns in southeastern Oklahoma, or actually supporting southeast Oklahoma generally. It is the poor corner of the state. And it is a great little town with wonderful history, and it deserves to have support. And I was in a position to set up a nonprofit, and we support local activities. We work with some other local charities and do some events and support a variety of different issues.
So your ranch is called Frogsay, Frogsay, spelled like Versailles.
Correct.
Tell me the story behind that name.
Well, I had bought the property. I bought it off of my friend Dick and his wife Mildred, my junior high choir directors, as I referred to earlier. And I was on a wonderful European vacation. I turned 40, and one of my girlfriends and I went to Paris and then to sort of the surrounding countryside. And we were at Versailles. We're in the little chariot thing being taken around, and they're giving us the spiel. And they're explaining the size of the property and this and that. And I thought, my property's this size. It's close to Frogville. It lacks historic significance. And it doesn't have a lot of really cool old buildings, but Frogsay sounds like a pretty good name for it. So that was the source of the name.
That's fun. So you also provide pro bono legal services, or at least you did, to a municipality in Choctaw County, which is a recognized federal poverty area. What does that look like day to day? Are you still doing that?
My schedule got to be such that I really don't have time for that. So I passed the baton to someone else on that. But Choctaw County is the poorest county in Oklahoma and has been essentially since statehood. So the only way that municipalities in Oklahoma get funding is through sales tax. And that's great in theory, but if you don't have any businesses to generate sales tax, you don't generate any money. And as a result of that, the local municipality doesn't have a big budget for legal services. And it was during COVID, and I had time and they had need, and I thought that I could provide them with some help. They were between assignments with local counsel, and so I stepped in and did what I could.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we
So
do.
you,
It's what we ought
yeah.
to do. I mean, they had a need and I had the time. I no longer have the time, so someone else now does that. But it was a great learning experience.
Sooner. Okay, so you served on the National Association of Women Lawyers Supreme Court Nominee Evaluation Committee. What was that like?
That was fascinating. That was a peek behind the curtain. I haven't served on, I guess, the last three uh, nominees, but I served for about 10 years before that. And I served on the subcommittee that interviewed people who had worked for the individual nominees. And we interviewed them, talked to them about what their experience was like, what the people were actually like, what the judge's temperament was, what their views were behind the curtain. All of the interviews were confidential, and we promised them anonymity. But it was a really, really interesting process.
If you could go back and give one piece of advice to the little girl in Frogville who was about to become a secretary, what would you tell her?
I'd tell her to take a business class. That's the one thing I didn't take when I was in college. I took lots of classes because I could do it on someone else's nickel, but I didn't take any business classes. And in all seriousness, I tell everyone they should take at least one basic business class so you understand credits and debits and how you keep track of taxes and all of the things you need to do when you're running a business. Because I didn't do that. And I had a lot of on the job training that was not as much fun as it could have been.
So, where can people find your books or book you to speak or connect with you?
They can find me on my website. I actually have two websites. I have a generalized website, which is sharlafrost.com, and you can find the children's books and information about the broad scope of things that I do there. I also have a website that's specific to speaking, and that is sharlajfrostspeaker.com. And you can book me for speaking and training and things of that nature through that. The books are generally available wherever books are sold online. I have not been as successful in getting them into physical bookstores, but there aren't that many physical bookstores anymore, so I'm not sure that's a real problem. But they are available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
So, when you're speaking, what kind of venues do you generally like, or have you been booked at?
I've done some corporate speaking. I've done speaking for women's groups. I've done speaking for law groups. Uh, my favorite speaking story. I was the 8 o'clock in the morning speaker on a Friday morning for a 1,500 person legal conference. I was talking about jury selection. And of course, no one expects anyone to show up at that time because it's the morning after the big cocktail party. So those that aren't hungover are probably out playing golf. And it rained that morning. So I had a conference room of standing room only, close to 1,500 people listening to me talk about jury selection. And unbeknownst to me, my PowerPoint had failed. And behind me, there were three football field sized images of me speaking. So 20 years later, people still tell me, I remember seeing you speak. You had on that pink jacket. It's like, yeah, that would have been it. But I've spoken in a lot of different venues, and I like to speak on resilience, And I also like to speak on Cowgirls Get the Clients because that's fun. And it's good training for people. But I've done a variety of different things. I do some ongoing speaking for a local group of, I don't quite know how to describe it. It's a training program that helps kids that didn't finish high school. So they are able to do this program. They get a high school degree, they get an apprentice certificate in a variety of industries, and they get some other things out of it. And I do 2 different speeches for them. I do one on mindset and potential, which frankly, these are kids that, despite having difficulties, have the mindset to do something else. So I'm not sure I add a lot to that other than additional encouragement. And then I do a second one for them on the importance of thinking about your future and figuring out investments. And even if it's $5 a week, you need to save it because it'll make a difference when you're old. So that's been fun, and it's been very rewarding because that's something that they need to hear, and they don't usually have the opportunity to hear from people who are not there to lecture them about don't do that anymore, whatever that is.
Well, Sharla, thanks so much for coming on